Imagine a country smaller than New York City, no oil, no gold, no farmland. Almost no natural resources at all. And yet today, this tiny island is one of the richest places on Earth. This is Singapore. A country so small you can drive across it in less than an hour, but so important that ships, banks, tech companies, billion-dollar funds, and global trade routes all depend on it. And the strangest part, Singapore was not supposed to survive when it became independent in 1965. It had no army, no resources, no guaranteed water supply, racial tension, poverty, unemployment, and hostile neighbors around it. Most experts looked at Singapore and saw a country with almost no future. But Singapore did something almost no country does. It turned weakness into strategy. No land, build upward. No resources. Become useful to everyone. No domestic market. Connect the entire world. No oil. Become the place where oil, money, ships, and data move through. This is how one tiny island became a control room for the global economy. To understand Singapore, you have to start with its biggest problem: location. Singapore sits at the southern tip of Southeast Asia, right next to one of the most important shipping lanes on Earth, the Strait of Malacca. A huge share of world trade passes through this narrow route, between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. Oil from the Middle East, goods from China. Electronics from Asia, raw materials, food, machinery, everything. And Singapore understood something very early. If you cannot be a giant country, become the gate. So instead of trying to compete with huge nations by size, Singapore became the place everyone had to pass through. It built one of the most efficient ports in the world, not just a harbor, a machine. Ships arrive, containers move, fuel is supplied, goods are transferred, documents are processed, and the ship leaves fast. Clean, reliable. In global trade, reliability is power because companies do not care how romantic your country's story is. They care if their cargo arrives on time. And Singapore made itself almost impossible to ignore, but a port alone does not make a rich country. Many places have ports. Singapore's real trick was building trust. After independence, the government had one brutal problem: investors had no reason to believe in Singapore. Why would a global company put money into a tiny, unstable island with no resources? So Singapore made a deal with the world: bring your money here, and we will give you order, low corruption, strong courts, clean streets, efficient bureaucracy, good infrastructure, a skilled workforce, predictable rules. That sounds boring. But boring is exactly what money loves. Money is scared of chaos. Singapore became the opposite of chaos, and this is where Lee Kuan Yew comes in. He was not selling Singapore as a paradise. He was selling Singapore as a system, a place where things worked. While many young countries were fighting over ideology, Singapore was obsessed with execution, housing, education, security, ports, airports. Factories, banks. Everything had to be useful. The government built public housing at a massive scale, not just to give people apartments, but to create social stability, because a country with no stability cannot attract capital. Then Singapore invested heavily in education, because if you have no resources in the ground, your people become the resource. Then it invited multinational companies, electronics, pharmaceuticals, finance, shipping, semiconductors. Singapore did not try to do everything at once. It picked strategic industries and made itself extremely good at serving them, and slowly, the country changed from poor island to manufacturing hub, to trading hub, to financial hub, to one of the most important business centers on the planet. Today, Singapore is not just rich because people live well there. It is rich because the world uses it. Ships use Singapore. Banks use Singapore. Investors use Singapore. Airlines use Singapore. Tech companies use Singapore. Global supply chains use Singapore. That is the Difference: some countries are rich because they sell something. Singapore became rich because it became useful, and then came the money machine. Singapore did not just earn money and spend it. It built state investment giants like GIC and Temasek. These institutions invest Singapore's national wealth across the world: stocks, bonds, real estate, infrastructure, technology, banks, energy, health care. So while Singapore has almost no natural resources, it owns pieces of the global economy. This is very similar to Norway, but with one huge difference. Norway turned oil into investments. Singapore had no oil. Singapore turned discipline, trade, and trust into investments. That is even crazier, because Norway started with a gift from the ground. Singapore started with almost nothing, and yet it built a system where money from all over the world flows through one small island. But there is another side to this story. Singapore's model is not soft, it is strict, very strict. The government controls many parts of life. Rules are serious. Punishments are serious. Politics is not as open as in many Western countries. Public order is treated almost like national survival. And this is where people disagree. Supporters say this: discipline is exactly why Singapore survived. Critics say the price of efficiency was too much control, and both sides have a point, because Singapore's success was not built on freedom alone. It was built on order, almost extreme order. The country became clean, safe, rich, and efficient, but also tightly managed. And maybe that is the real question Singapore forces us to ask: how much control is acceptable if the result is stability, safety, and wealth? There is no simple answer. But what is impossible to deny is the outcome. In 1965, Singapore looked like a country that might fail. Today, it has one of the highest GDPs per person in the world. Its port handles tens of millions of containers a year. Its airport is one of the best connected in Asia. Its financial system manages wealth from across the planet. Its investment funds own global assets, and its location makes it one of the most important choke points in world trade. That is why Singapore matters, not because it is big, but because it sits in the middle of everything. It is the small country between giants: China, India, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, the West. Everyone can do business there. Everyone can move money there. Everyone can trust the system there, and trust is one of the most valuable currencies on earth. So when people ask how Singapore became rich, the answer is not one thing. It was not just the port, not just Lee Kuan Yew, not just low taxes, not just banks, not just discipline. It was the combination: location plus order, trade plus trust, education plus infrastructure, strict rules plus long-term planning. Singapore turned itself into a platform, and platforms are powerful because other people build on top of them. That is what the world did with Singapore. The world used Singapore to move goods, money, people, and information. And Singapore charged for being reliable. That is the whole secret. A tiny country with nothing under the ground became one of the most valuable pieces of the global economy because it understood one thing better than almost anyone else: you do not need to control the whole world. You just need to become the place the world cannot easily avoid. That is Singapore, a country too small to dominate by size, but powerful enough to matter everywhere.